Rush YYZ reaction videos have become some of the most popular music reaction content online, and there is one reason they keep exploding in views. Musicians simply cannot believe what they are hearing from Neil Peart. Even decades after the song was released, experienced drummers, guitarists, bass players, and music teachers still pause the video, shake their heads, and ask the same question: how did he do that? Now, that reaction feels even more relevant because the Rush 50-something tour has officially started, bringing Geddy Lee and Lifeson back to the stage and reminding fans around the world why Rush remains one of the most respected bands in rock history. Every performance sparks new conversations about the band's legacy, and once again, attention keeps returning to one man who is no longer here, Neil Peart. When musicians react to YYZ, they are not just listening to a great rock song. They are witnessing a level of technical precision that still challenges modern players. Released on Rush's 1981 album, Moving Pictures, YYZ became one of the band's signature instrumental tracks. The title comes from the airport code for Toronto Pearson International Airport, and the famous opening rhythm is based on the Morse code signal for those three letters. That fact alone surprises many first-time listeners, but then the drums begin. Suddenly, reactions change from curiosity to disbelief. Professional musicians often notice details that casual listeners miss. They hear the unusual time signatures. They hear the incredible coordination between Neil, Geddy, and Alex. Most importantly, they hear how Neil manages to sound both perfectly controlled and completely explosive at the same time. Many reaction videos start with confidence. The musician expects a classic rock instrumental. A few minutes later, that confidence is gone. Instead, they are rewinding sections, counting rhythms, and trying to understand how one drummer could make something so complex sound so natural. And that is where the story gets even more interesting. Because the deeper musicians dig into Neil Peart's performance on YYZ, the more they discover that the song is not just technically impressive. It is built on years of discipline, practice, and musical creativity that helped redefine what rock drumming could be. As soon as most Rush YYZ reaction videos reach the first major drum section, you can almost predict what will happen next. The person reacting stops talking, leans closer to the screen, and starts focusing entirely on Neil Peart. Why? Because Neil was doing things that seem impossible until you watch them carefully. One of the first things musicians notice is the incredible independence between his hands and feet. In many rock songs, the drummer provides a steady foundation while the guitar and bass take center stage. In YYZ, Neil becomes an equal voice in the conversation. His drum parts are not simply keeping time, they are actively helping shape the melody and energy of the song. Professional drummers often point to the way Neil moves around the kit with almost machine-like precision. Every fill lands exactly where it needs to. Every accent supports the music, yet nothing feels robotic. The performance sounds alive, dynamic, and full of personality. Then there are the time signatures. Rush became famous for using unusual rhythmic structures, and YYZ is one of the best examples. Musicians reacting for the first time. One of the biggest surprises in Rush YYZ reaction videos is what musicians learn after the song ends. They discover that Neil Peart was never satisfied. That may sound strange, considering he was already regarded as one of the greatest drummers in rock history. But according to numerous interviews and documented accounts throughout his career, Neil constantly pushed himself to improve. He believed there was always something new to learn. This is where many reactions shift from admiration to genuine respect. Musicians realize that the performance they just heard in YYZ was not the result of natural talent alone. It came from years of disciplined practice, study, and dedication. Neil spent countless hours refining his technique, analyzing rhythms, and expanding his musical vocabulary. What makes this story even more remarkable is that he continued evolving long after reaching superstar status. In the 1990s, after decades of success with Rush, Neil began studying with respected drum instructor Freddie Gruber. Many musicians would have assumed there was nothing left for him to learn. Neil disagreed. He was willing to rebuild parts of his technique from the ground up if it meant becoming a better player. That mindset still amazes drummers today. When reaction channels discuss Neil's greatness, they often focus on speed or complexity. But experienced musicians frequently point to something deeper: humility. Despite his reputation, Neil approached music as a lifelong student. That attitude is one reason his influence continues to grow. As the Rush 50-something tour brings renewed attention to the band's legacy, younger musicians are discovering not only the music, but also the philosophy behind it. They see a drummer who never stopped learning, and a band that constantly challenged itself creatively. And that philosophy extended beyond Neil. Geddy Lee and Lifeson were equally committed to pushing boundaries. Together, the three musicians developed a level of chemistry that became one of Rush's defining strengths. Each member could perform at an elite level, but their true magic came from how seamlessly they worked together. That chemistry is especially obvious in YYZ. Listen closely and you'll hear something remarkable. The bass, guitar, and drums are all doing highly sophisticated things, yet somehow the song remains focused and cohesive. Instead of competing for attention, the musicians are locked into a conversation that feels almost telepathic. For many reaction creators, that realization becomes the turning point. They stop viewing YYZ as a technical showcase and start seeing it as a masterpiece of collaboration. And once they reach that conclusion, another question naturally follows. Was Neil Peart simply a great drummer, or did he fundamentally change what drummers believed was possible? In the next batch, we'll examine how Neil's influence spread across generations and why so many modern musicians still measure themselves against the standard he set. By the time most Rush YYZ reaction videos are finished, a pattern begins to emerge. The musicians reacting are no longer asking whether Neil Peart was talented. That question has already been answered. Instead, they start discussing his impact on the entire world of drumming. And that impact is difficult to overstate. Before Neil arrived on the scene with Rush in the 1970s, rock drumming often focused on supporting the song from the background. There were certainly great drummers already making history, but Neil helped expand expectations. He showed that a drummer could be a technical innovator, a composer, and a driving creative force within a band. Many modern drummers openly credit him as an inspiration. Across rock, progressive metal, hard rock, and even genres outside traditional rock music, his influence can still be heard today. What stands out in YYZ is how complete his skill set was. He had speed, he had power, he had endurance, but he also had something that many technical players struggle to develop: musical storytelling. Every section of YYZ feels like it is taking the listener somewhere. The drums are not simply executing difficult patterns. They are helping build tension, excitement, and momentum. That is why the song remains engaging even after countless listens. Musicians reacting to the track often mention this exact point. They may initially focus on the complexity, but eventually they recognize the bigger achievement. Neil made complexity feel exciting rather than intimidating. That is one reason new generations continue discovering Rush. As the Rush 50-something tour generates excitement among fans, countless younger listeners are being introduced to the band's catalog. Some were not even born when Moving Pictures was released in 1981. Yet they hear YYZ today and react with the same amazement that audiences felt decades ago. Very few songs can accomplish that. Even fewer instrumental songs can do it. Without lyrics, YYZ relies entirely on musicianship and emotion. Somehow, Rush turned an instrumental track into one of the most recognizable pieces in rock history. And perhaps the most fascinating part is this: the more musicians study the song, the more details they find. A fill they missed before, a rhythmic transition they never noticed, a subtle interaction between bass and drums. Each new discovery reinforces the same conclusion. This was not an ordinary performance. It was the product of three musicians operating at an extraordinarily high level. But there is one emotional element that makes today's reactions especially powerful. Whenever YYZ is discussed in the context of the current Rush era, Neil's absence becomes impossible to ignore. And that reality gives every conversation about his legacy even greater meaning. One of the most emotional parts of modern Rush YYZ reaction videos happens when the discussion moves beyond the music itself. Eventually, almost every conversation reaches the same subject: Neil Peart's legacy. Even though Neil passed away in January 2020 after a private battle with brain cancer, his influence remains deeply connected to everything Rush represents. Fans don't simply remember him as a drummer. They remember him as a lyricist, a thinker, and one of the defining creative forces behind the band. That connection has become especially clear during the Rush 50-something tour, which has already generated enormous interest among fans. Wherever Rush-related performances and celebrations take place, Neil's impact is impossible to miss. His spirit is present in the songs, his influence is present in the musicians, and his legacy is present in the audience. For many longtime fans, hearing music associated with Rush creates a mixture of excitement and reflection. They celebrate the return of Geddy Lee and Lifeson while also remembering the man who helped build the band's extraordinary catalog. That emotional balance appears constantly in reaction videos. A musician may begin by analyzing Neil's technique. They talk about stick control, timing, coordination, and rhythmic complexity. But by the end, many are speaking about something larger. They are talking about inspiration. Neil's story resonates because it demonstrates what can happen when talent meets relentless dedication. He wasn't content to rely on past accomplishments. He kept learning, improving, and challenging himself throughout his career. That mindset continues inspiring musicians of all ages. Some reaction creators admit that watching Neil perform motivates them to practice harder. Others describe discovering Rush for the first time and immediately understanding why the band commands such respect. And perhaps that is the greatest measure of Neil's legacy. His performances are not trapped in the past. They continue creating new fans, they continue influencing new musicians, and they continue generating fresh reactions decades after they were recorded. Every time someone presses play on YYZ, the cycle begins again. A listener expects to hear a famous instrumental track. Minutes later, they find themselves witnessing a masterclass in musicianship. The result is almost always the same: admiration, disbelief, and respect. But there is one final reason YYZ remains such a powerful experience for audiences today. It reveals something essential about Rush itself, a quality that explains why the band's music continues attracting listeners across generations. So after watching countless Rush YYZ reaction videos, one thing becomes crystal clear. The reason musicians can't believe Neil Peart isn't just because he was fast. It isn't just because he was technically brilliant. And it isn't simply because he played difficult rhythms that most drummers would struggle to perform. The real reason is that Neil combined all of those abilities with something far more rare: musical purpose. Every note in YYZ feels intentional. Every fill serves the song. Every transition helps tell a story. That is why musicians continue reacting the way they do. They are not just witnessing impressive drumming, they are witnessing a performance where technical mastery and creativity work together at the highest level. More than 40 years after its release on Moving Pictures, YYZ remains one of the most respected instrumental tracks in rock history. New listeners discover it every day. Experienced musicians return to it again and again, and each time they find another detail worth admiring. Very few songs age this well. Even fewer continue inspiring entirely new generations of performers. That enduring power helps explain why Rush remains such an important name in music. The band's catalog is filled with remarkable songs, but YYZ stands as one of the clearest examples of what made Rush unique. Geddy Lee's inventive bass work, Lifeson's dynamic guitar playing, and Neil Peart's groundbreaking drumming came together to create something timeless. Today, as the Rush 50-something tour continues and fans celebrate the band's incredible legacy, those achievements feel more meaningful than ever. Audiences are once again reminded of the chemistry, ambition, and musicianship that made Rush one of the most respected bands in rock history. And while Geddy Lee and Lifeson continue carrying that legacy forward, Neil's presence remains impossible to ignore. Every time YYZ is played, studied, discussed, or featured in a reaction video, his influence lives on. That may be the most remarkable part of all. Decades after recording the song, Neil Peart is still teaching musicians, still inspiring drummers, still setting standards, still creating moments where experienced players stop, rewind the video, and ask, "How did he do that?" And perhaps there is no greater compliment for an artist. Because in 2026, just as in 1981, YYZ continues to prove that true greatness doesn't fade with time. It keeps challenging us, it keeps inspiring us, and it keeps leaving us speechless. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your own favorite Neil Peart or YYZ moment in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.